Welcome to the SBCA podcast, Component Connection, where we explore the people, ideas, trends, and innovations shaping the market and the future of structural building components. Whether you're on the shop floor, in the office, in the yard, or out in the field, we're glad you're here.
Hello, I'm Sean Shields, Director of Marketing at SBCA, and I'll be your host for this episode of Component Connection. I'm joined today by Ben Tabolt, the Director of the Technical Development Group at MiTek. In this episode, we're going to look at the role of the architect and briefly discuss what it might look like for component manufacturers to work more closely with architects and what benefits may come from that kind of collaboration. Ben, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Sean. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Well, Ben, you practice architecture, but you aren't strictly doing architectural things at the moment. Can you briefly share with us kind of your career as an architect and ultimately what enticed you to become an ambassador of sorts to your peers instead?
Absolutely. So my background started actually in the construction industry. My father was a contractor and I began working on his crews before even going into the architectural field. It was a smaller crew, so I was really educated in a lot of aspects, everything from screeding concrete to setting walls to trusses, helping the crane set trusses and everything. So it really cut my teeth on an understanding of building science. And then always been artistic and creative. So I thought, well, maybe architecture would be a great career for me. So I got my degree from Syracuse University and spent the first 5 years out of college doing the typical architectural path, working for a architectural engineering firm in upstate New York, with a goal of becoming a licensed architect and an eventual partner at the firm. One of the unique things about the organization that I worked for initially, we were what we called a one-stop shop, where in-house we had licensed architects, structural engineers, mechanical engineers, electrical, plumbing engineers, civil survey, and construction administration. So unlike a lot of typical architecture firms that only focus on the architectural aspect and then collaborate with outside partners, we were accountable for the entire design and that holistic design approach. So I really believe that kind of got me at an early stage in my career thinking about collaboration and holistic design approach. It's also where I really began to cut my teeth in BIM technology. I've been a Revit Power user since that time, and coming from the industry where I started doing designs on schools, hospitals, municipal, et cetera, in 2D, and then a few years into my career switching into full BIM, realizing the benefit of that type of model collaboration and utilizing technology between all trades and being able to have a holistic model. I mean, we witnessed field change orders and issues drop by up to 50 to 60% just because we had the capability of full collaboration. So that's really kind of where I started to think through that process. And then a major curveball happened when my wife and I relocated to Colorado Springs to pursue a career opportunity for her. And me being an architect, I'm sure I can pick up some things in an urban environment there in Denver. But what really fascinated me was upon arrival, the first kind of design groups that I started connecting with and contractors, it's during this housing boom, which is still existing and going along the Front Range. So I was fascinated by the amount of production housing and also very large scale custom housing that was going in along the Rockies, and also very intrigued by the fact that it seemed like no one was utilizing BIM technology in order to accomplish these jobs, and it was still very old school practices. So I partnered with another architect and a residential design group, and specifically they wanted me to bring them into BIM on kind of the timber design side of things, both with multifamily and single family design. So spent a few years coaching, guiding, and customizing their teams and really kind of proving out the success of BIM technology in a residential environment. And then one day they approached me and said, you need to do a company that's based on this. Like, what are you talking about? Well, residential design, but with a BIM twist. And so they convinced me to start up and they partnered with me. And we grew very fast over the next 5 years, really reaching out and being a support system and team for designers and contractors all over the country that were focusing on residential, but did not understand how to use the modern technology of BIM to accomplish their jobs and create that efficiency. So in many cases, they would give us their jobs in 2D and my team would turn them around, provide a full BIM solution to them. And as part of that, that's when I really started to develop partnerships and relationships with a lot of component manufacturers. And being someone whose background was always focused on holistic and collaborative design, I realized very quickly that not just partnering with a structural engineer or an MEP team throughout my concepts to be able to say, okay, what's my floor to floor? What's my depth of my ductwork? But really utilizing the wisdom and guidance and understanding that component manufacturers had to suggest improvements, maybe slight shifts in architecture that would optimize offsite componentization, whether that was wall panels, roof or floor trusses, et cetera. It became a real kind of light bulb moment for me that there was another constituent that our industry was largely ignoring, that if we could find a way to bring them in to the conversations early enough, it would increase the optimization and the confidence level of our designs as we move forward. So I started speaking on behalf of the American Institute of Building Design all about that type of collaboration and my personal testimony with how successful it was. And one of the locations I was speaking at, MiTek, was present, and they began talking with me and chatting with me about potentially joining their team. So my group and my company was acquired by MiTek in 2020. And since then, I've been supporting our global services, but also working with the collaboration between the design portion of builders and architects and connecting that to our component manufacturer and fabricator customers. But many of you may be familiar with our design, make, build philosophy. I really kind of live in the design era. And how can we bring more understanding, more value, more optimization into the design phase and allow architects and designers to have more of a confident, optimized solution because of their interaction with component manufacturers. So that's what I've been doing. It's kind of an advocate or ambassador, if you will. I still get to practice and still get to work on designs and coach and guide, but really from an aspect of collaboration and kind of sharing the appreciation and vision that I have and success that I've had with that type of collaboration between myself as an architect working with offsite component teams.
And that's a fascinating journey. And I think about that role that you are now in at MiTek. I mean, what do you believe is the best way for our industry to effectively reach architects and help them gain that sort of same understanding and experience that you have?
It's a great question. It's also kind of a challenging question because it does cause both sides to have to rethink the way that they come together, if you will. From the architect's perspective, for instance, old habits die hard. And I mean, I can tell you right now, a typical design on a single family residential, the first thing that would be done once the plate height is determined is, okay, I've got 1 foot 0 and 5/8, or I've got 14 and 3/4. Well, why is that? Because it's been baked into my brain that 11 and 7/8 inch I-joist and 3/4 inch plywood, there's your one. Or if it's a larger span or a heavier floor finish system, you're going to go to a 14 inch I-joist. But being able to expand into that and have that understanding of what's possible for floor truss opportunity. What does that do to eliminate bulkheads for mechanical drops? And having those understandings, it's hard for architects to kind of break out of that, I think. And in many cases, unfortunately, there's this mindset of just pass it off, coordinate and field by others. You see all over drawings, or coordinate by others or by trusses or whatever. So I think that an education and an understanding of the optimization that can come from that partnership with component manufacturers is huge. And then on the CM side, I've talked with a lot of our customers, and I've kind of pitched the idea, what if you were invited to partner early on in a design process and kind of give your insight? And I've received, honestly, mixed messages from some of our component manufacturer customers. Some of them are very eager and they would love to have a voice because it would help them when they actually receive the job to have a voice that has informed the design prior to them getting it. But I have others at the same time say, I'm just too busy and I can't see myself taking the time to come up front and communicate with architects. Just give me the design and I'll figure it out, which obviously has its own challenges because then you're reacting to a design instead of informing a design. So I think understanding that through case study examples, when we have had builders and architects and component manufacturers partner, there starts to be a testimonial, if you will, of, wow, we had this much savings and this many less errors on site. And they actually saved us X amount per iteration of this project by optimizing the structural system. We like to say that partnership opportunity between design teams and component manufacturers, we fully believe is exponentially more valuable than commoditizing those teams and just throwing the designs at them and saying, go figure this out. And I always joke with people whenever I'm in a component manufacturer audience, the first thing I say is I'm an architect, but before you start throwing things at me, I'm an architect who built houses before, because there is that kind of animosity where the architects have a haughtiness of, oh, they'll just figure it out. And the component manufacturers say, wow, do they even know how to build a building? And this is just annoying for us to have to deal with people that are not considering these things. So if we can meet in the middle on that, I think we can create a harmonious conclusion. It's just, we have to change the mindset of doing more upfront and more collaboration upfront, and that's so much more downstream.
Ben, I really like what you're saying here. I also like the point that you brought up that one of the ways to be successful in this is to identify the times when you are successful and highlight those, right? White papers, case examples, case studies, that kind of thing. I mean, with the time that we have left, I'm wondering, can you give an example of what this collaboration would look like in the real world? I mean, if an architect was interested in starting to bridge that gap with, between them, the design, and the component manufacturer, what actions do you think the architect could take? And I guess the same goes for the component manufacturer. What could they do if they're hearing what you're saying and saying, you know what, I don't have time, but I also acknowledge that maybe it would, in the long run, it would save me some time. What should they do?
Oh, that's a great point. I actually have a few case study examples. The first one was really how I came in to the understanding and collaboration with component manufacturers myself personally. And this is a story that I tell to all my design friends as an opportunity and justification for what I'm saying. It was about 2015. I was doing a very large design for a custom home in the Castle Rock, Colorado area. And the local truss plant that the builder identified they'd be working with, I called the plant manager and said, I'd really like to sit down and go through my design to make sure that we're doing everything correct. And went into their office, and that was the first time that I saw MiTek Sapphire software and realized, whoa, you guys are in BIM, you're doing 3D? Well, I'm in Revit. Why don't I get a 3D model from you? And why can't we collaborate a little bit more effectively? And we found out a way to export it out and plug it into my design. And that to me was phenomenal, because when I went to permit my building sections, my roof edge details, everything, they were actually reflecting the truss designs, and they could be specific and precise, which allowed a streamlined construction process. So that was kind of phase one of my journey. But then phase two really took it the next level step, where I went back to that same plant when I was doing a new design. And I said, I know you're busy, but would you take an hour, look at my plans, and let me know what you think? And their responses, back like, Ben, if you shift this wall 6 inches in, it's not going to affect your architecture monumentally, but we can take that 3-ply girder truss and make it a 2-ply. That's going to save your customer quite a bit of money on this. So things that I would have never understood as an architect, but being able to communicate and share that information, which I initiated because I saw the value in it, but I think it could go both ways, where I, as an architect, can share that as an ambassador to other designers, but component manufacturers can kind of pitch that value of communication and collaboration up front. It just radically changed the way that I did things. And kind of carrying that mantra into my career at MiTek, we had a case study that we did a few years ago with a very large top 20 builder. They were doing a new community, and I believe they were going to do versions of their masters about 500 to 700 times. And I asked them, I said, I know that sometimes you shop your component manufacturers, but would you humor me? Would you give me a component manufacturer that you're most likely going to use in this community? So they gave me a name. We called that component manufacturer and said, can you humor us on this? We don't want you to just react to these designs. I know you're going to be seeing them. For this study, would you be willing to have a meeting with myself, the builder, the builder's design team, and their structural engineer, and yourselves, where you come and propose optimizations to the plan? So that happened 3 weeks later in person at the builder's office. And they, number of things like, if you go bottom cord bearing, you can eliminate these hangers. If you go in this direction, we can eliminate this trim board. There were a number of proposals that they presented. And one by one, the structural engineer for the builder said, yeah, we can do that. Yeah, that's not a problem. Yeah, it's another way of looking at it. And come to find out, I asked the CM, I said, how much do you, on average, is this going to save per home? And they said probably about $2,000 to $2,500 of optimizations is what we are tracking here. So later that night, when it was just myself and the design team and the builder at dinner, I said, humor me. I said, you talk about shopping these teams. What are you looking for a market of this size to maybe get out of this? Well, a low bidder might outbid the next bidder by $100,000 to $200,000 on the job of this size. I'm like, do you realize though that you didn't just gain $200,000 by shopping a low bidder? Multiply $2,500 savings by 500 homes, you just lost multi-million dollars of optimization because you chose to not engage and collaborate with the team. And that was kind of really, you had to show it to them in their product to see it, but that became kind of the light bulb moment for both sides to say, if we can break the mold of the norm and really come together, and whether that's an architectural team, which we're trying to encourage to partner with a CM, or a CM team that really wants to break out of just the I'll figure it out and be an ambassador to the design teams, it becomes a huge opportunity to position our industry and then start to bake in the normal thought process of, okay, if I'm doing a design, well, I got to talk with my structural engineer to understand spans and capabilities. I need to understand what we're doing MEP. But oh, by the way, I really should engage with my component manufacturer to make sure that I understand what my possibilities are for optimization there. So those are kind of two case study examples that I share where we kind of instigated both with the design team inviting the component manufacturer, but we have had many more examples. MiTek has had a series of what we call our innovation builds and innovation designs. And the success of those are really the partnerships that are created between the design team, the builder team, and the component manufacturer team. And it's a challenge sometimes for groups to kind of step outside of what they're used to doing. But when that wisdom and insight from that stakeholder in the offsite componentization group can be poured in early enough, and I think that's the other key, early enough in the design, that really helps in a profound way. One of the things that I found when we've tried to partner a little too late, for instance, the design's already done, and now we're trying to pitch optimizations. No structural engineer or architect wants to go back through and revise their drawings, even if it's something that is good and is going to be for the benefit of the project. So if we can be proactive in informing the first time that design happens, as opposed to reactive and, well, maybe we missed it on this one, we'll do it on the next one, I believe we can get there together effectively. And that's what we're really trying to do within MiTek and, really within the industry, is understand the benefits of partnership and collaboration in design process, which the more and more that we advance into BIM technology and get out of the 2D world and into BIM, which we're doing a major push for that with our builders now globally, because you have the 3D modeling capability. Collaboration is much more demanded in a way that it wasn't in the past. So how do we do that while we still protect the intellectual property of the individual stakeholders, but at the same time promote the value that their partnership presents? I think that's the key to success for us.
Ben, that's all very fascinating. And it's great that there are those wins out there that you can point to and say, this is how this can work. What really strikes me as I'm hearing you talk and share these stories is that this is really about ensuring that the people who have all the necessary information, the valuable information, they're talking to one another when that information would make a difference. So the designer bringing in a component manufacturer before the designs are done, because the component manufacturer understands the structure, the manufacturing process, the constructability of it, the cost of materials, all those kinds of things. They're bringing information to bear to the building designer that they wouldn't otherwise normally have because of how the construction industry is so siloed, right?
That's absolutely correct. And it also has a cascading effect on additional decisions. For instance, a building where, if we are considering open web floor trusses, for instance, well, as an architect, I can completely radicalize and change how I have the lower level of that, because now I can integrate my mechanical systems into the floor system, and I don't have to think about bulkheads and drop beams and items like that. So those type of conversations, while beneficial for the structural system themselves, also have, relative effects on the entire rest of the design positioning of the home. And, as I alluded to early in my career, we would have our pre-design kickoff meetings where we'd all go into a boardroom and the structural engineer would be there and the MEP team. And as an architect, I'm going, okay, what's my maximum span? How much do I need to allow for my duct work? Are we doing recessed lights? The whole aspect of that is when you're doing a design in commercial projects, say that's doing, wide flange steel, the structural engineer is also kind of the expert in optimal spans and all sorts of items. But when you get into timber construction, structural engineers know a lot, but they do not know the amount of detail, nuances, and opportunities that a component manufacturer knows. And I believe that partnership between the structural thought process, but also the component manufacturer's subject matter expertise, those is a 1-2 punch that I believe builders and designers need to take more advantage of in the future.
Excellent. Well, Ben, thank you so much for your insights and for joining us today on the podcast.
I'm so happy to be here, and hopefully I can be here in the future, and I love to share this information. This is my passion and what I live for, so I really appreciate you having me here.
Well, I want to thank everyone else for listening to this episode of SBCA's podcast, Component Connection. If you've enjoyed this episode and found it valuable, please like it and share it with others. Stay up to date and in the know by subscribing to Component Connection on whatever platform you use most.
Thanks for listening to Component Connection, brought to you by SBCA. If there's a topic you'd like us to explore in a future episode, email us at podcast@sbcacomponents.com. Until next time, stay connected.